The night my daughter told me to get out of her house, it was raining so hard I couldn't see the end of the driveway. I was 69 years old. I had a bad hip. I was wearing the same cardigan I'd worn to dinner 2 hours earlier, when everything still felt normal. When I still thought my daughter loved me. She didn't say it kindly. She didn't lower her voice or look away. She stood in the doorway of the house I had helped her buy. The down payment, the closing costs, all of it. And she said, "I need you to leave, Dad. Tonight. We're done." Her husband was standing behind her. He didn't say a word. He just watched me the way a man watches something he's already decided he doesn't need anymore. I picked up my overnight bag. I walked to my car in the rain, and I sat there in the dark for a long time before I could make myself turn the key. I want to tell you the whole story, because it didn't start that night. It started the way these things always start, slowly, quietly, with small things you talk yourself out of noticing. My name is Leonard. I spent 31 years as a cardiovascular surgeon at a regional hospital in western Pennsylvania. I retired at 64, which most people thought was early, but my hands had started to shake just slightly in the mornings, and I wasn't willing to be the doctor who waited too long. My wife Patricia passed away 4 years before I retired. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I still don't have words for that. After she was gone, it was just me and the house and my daughter Nora. Nora was our only child. Patricia and I had tried for more, but it didn't happen, and we made our peace with that. We poured everything into Nora, which I think now was maybe too much. Not too much love. I don't believe in that. But too much certainty. We gave her too much certainty that the world would arrange itself around her needs. She was bright. She finished college in 3 years, got her MBA at 24, and was managing a regional marketing division by 28. I was proud. I told her I was proud every time I had the chance. When she called me on Sunday mornings, I answered on the first ring. She met her husband, Douglas, at a conference in Atlanta. He was in commercial real estate. Handsome in an aggressive sort of way, the kind of man who shakes your hand a little too firmly and makes steady eye contact for just a beat longer than feels natural. I try to like him. I did like him for a while, or I liked the idea of him, which is different. They got married when Nora was 32. Small ceremony, her choice. I walked her down the aisle and I didn't cry until I was back in my hotel room that night, alone, missing Patricia so badly it felt like a physical thing sitting on my chest. Douglas and I were never close, but we were cordial. He asked about golf, which I don't play. I asked about his projects. We managed. At Thanksgiving and Christmas, we sat at the same table and found enough to talk about. I told myself that was enough. That not every father-in-law and son-in-law needed to be friends. That what mattered was that Nora was happy. She seemed happy. For a while, she seemed very happy. The first thing I noticed was the phone calls. For years, Nora had called me every Sunday morning. It was our thing. Started when she left for college and never stopped. An hour, sometimes more. We talked about everything. Her work, my patients, books we were reading, memories of Patricia. Those calls were the best part of my week. Then she started missing them. Once, then twice. When I'd call her back, she'd answer briefly, distracted, and say she'd call me later. She rarely did. When I mentioned it gently, just once, just to say I missed our talks, she apologized in a way that felt practiced, like she'd rehearsed it. Around the same time, Douglas had started a new development project. A large one, from what I could gather. Mixed-use commercial space outside Pittsburgh. He was excited about it in a way that made me slightly uneasy, because I recognized the feeling. I'd seen it in people who were stretched too thin and moving too fast. He talked about it constantly at Christmas dinner that year. Numbers that sounded enormous. Timelines that sounded optimistic. I didn't say anything. It wasn't my business. Then, in early spring, Nora called me on a Tuesday, not a Sunday, a Tuesday, which was already strange, and said that Douglas's project was running into some cash flow issues, that they needed a bridge loan just for a few months to cover a gap while a larger investment came through. She wondered if I might be able to help. I want to be careful here, because I know how this part sounds. I know people will wonder why I said yes. But you have to understand that this was my daughter. This was the person I had raised. The person I had sat with in emergency rooms and driven to piano lessons and held while she cried over things that seemed enormous at 17 and small at 30. When your child asks you for help, something in you doesn't stop to calculate risk. Something in you doesn't stop to calculate risk. I transferred $250,000 into their account in April. Nora was grateful. Douglas called me personally to thank me, which he had never done before. He said the investment was solid, that I'd see every cent back within 6 months, and that he appreciated my trust. He sounded confident. He sounded like a man who believed what he was saying. The 6 months came and went. I didn't ask about it. I told myself they were busy, that these things take time, that I wasn't going to be the kind of father who made his daughter feel like a debtor. I let it sit. Then in the fall, Nora mentioned that another phase of the project was delayed, that there were permitting issues, that it would probably be another few months. She said it the way you say something you've been rehearsing, quickly, flatly, like if you move past it fast enough, the other person won't have time to ask questions. I asked one question, just one. I asked if the original money was still intact or if it had been spent. There was a long pause. It's all going toward the same project, Dad. It's all the same pool. That was the moment I understood. Not everything, not yet, but enough. I had a friend, Norman, who I'd known since medical school. We'd both ended up in Pennsylvania by different routes, and we'd stayed close the way that's only possible with people who knew you before you became whoever you turned out to be. Norman was the person I called when Patricia died at 2 a.m, unable to stop shaking. He drove 3 hours to sit with me. Norman was also, before he retired, a financial attorney. I called him in October and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I'd always appreciated about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Leonard," he said, "I want you to come see me, and I want you to bring every document you have, transfer records, anything Nora or Douglas ever sent you in writing, anything at all." I drove to his house that weekend. What Norman helped me understand over 2 days of quiet conversation and careful review was that Douglas's project was not what I had been told it was. The permitting issues were real, but they were the least of it. The project had been undercapitalized from the beginning. Several other investors, small ones, family friends of Douglas's, had been brought in on similar terms. The money wasn't going into an escrow or a dedicated account. It was going into an operating account that Douglas controlled directly, and had been funding, among other things, a lifestyle that had very little to do with commercial real estate. Norman helped me document everything. He connected me with a securities attorney. He sat across from me one evening with a cup of coffee and said, gently, "You know what this means for Nora." "Yes," I said, "I know." "And you're still going to do this?" I looked at him for a long time. "She's not a victim in this, Norman." She knew what she was asking me. She made a choice. He nodded slowly. He didn't say I was wrong. What happened next happened faster than I expected. In November, I told Nora I needed to talk to her. I drove to their house on a Saturday afternoon, which was a 3-hour drive, and I sat at their kitchen table and I told her, calmly, that I was aware of what had happened to my money. I told her I had documentation. I told her I had spoken with an attorney and that unless we could have an honest conversation about what was going on, I was going to have no choice but to pursue legal remedies. I said it quietly. I didn't raise my voice. I'd spent 30 years delivering bad news to patients and their families, and I'd learned a long time ago that volume doesn't change anything. Douglas, who had been standing by the counter, said, "You need to be very careful about making accusations you can't support." "I can support them," I said. "I have the records." Something shifted in the room. I watched it happen. Watched Nora look at Douglas, and watched Douglas look at Nora, and watched something pass between them that I wasn't meant to see. Nora said, "Dad, you're confused. This is the early stages of something. Douglas and I have been talking. We're worried about you. Your memory, your judgment. We think you need to see someone." I looked at my daughter who I had held in a hospital room 4 years ago while she said goodbye to her mother, who I had loved for her entire life. "I'm not confused, Nora." "Dad." "I'm not confused," Douglas said. You should probably go, Leonard. Give us some time to think about this. Come back when you're feeling better. I picked up my jacket. I walked to the door, and then Nora said with her husband right behind her, "Actually, Dad, I think it's better if you don't come back. We need some space. Indefinitely." I stood in the rain in their driveway. I found my car. I drove until I found a Holiday Inn 20 minutes down the highway, and I checked in, and I sat on the edge of the bed in a room that smelled like cleaning solution, and I was very still for a long time. I was 69 years old. I had given my daughter everything I had to give for her entire life, and she had just told me not to come back. I want to tell you about the 3 months that followed, because I think people sometimes assume that a person in my situation falls apart. I didn't fall apart. I want to be honest about why. Part of it was Norman. He called me every few days, not to discuss the legal case, just to check in. He had known Patricia too, and sometimes we'd end up talking about her for an hour. He was the reason I ate dinner most nights instead of just going to bed. Part of it was my work. I'd been volunteering 2 mornings a week at a free clinic in Pittsburgh since I retired. Nothing surgical, just checkups, referrals, blood pressure readings for people who couldn't afford a regular doctor. I kept going. I kept showing up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the people there didn't know anything about my daughter or my money, and that was a relief I can't fully describe. To be useful in a room where none of the rest of it existed. And part of it, I'll be honest, was the attorney. Her name was Sandra, and Norman had referred her to me. She was in her mid-50s, calm and precise in the way of someone who has seen a great many things go wrong and learned not to be surprised by any of them. When I laid out the full situation for her, she didn't wince. She took notes. She asked follow-up questions. And at the end of 2 hours, she said, "Dr. Ashby, what you have here is a civil fraud case that is quite solid, and there are also elements that may be of interest to the state attorney's office." "Meaning criminal," I said. "Potentially, yes. That's not a decision you have to make today, but I want you to understand your options." I drove home thinking about Nora. About what she looked like at 10 years old, helping Patricia set the table for Thanksgiving. About the way she used to call me when she was scared, no matter the hour. About what she had said to me in that driveway. I thought about those things, and then I called Sandra back and told her to proceed. The civil suit was filed in January. Douglas was served at his office on a Wednesday morning, which I heard about from Sandra, who heard about it from the process server. Nora called me that afternoon, the first time she'd called since November. Her voice was not the voice of someone who was confused or worried about my mental state. She was furious. She said I was destroying their lives. She said I was selfish and vindictive, and that I had never really supported her marriage. She said things that I will not repeat here, because repeating them would mean giving them more weight than they deserve. I let her finish, and then I said, "Nora, you asked me for my trust, and I gave it to you. I would have given you anything, you know that." She didn't say anything. What was done with that money was not legal. You know that too. I can't pretend otherwise. And I won't. Not for you. Not for anyone. The line was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "I don't know who you are anymore." I thought about that. I still think about it sometimes. "I'm your father," I said. "I've always been your father. That hasn't changed." She hung up. The state attorney's office contacted Sandra in February. They had been looking at Douglas's project independently. Apparently, I was not the only person who had eventually made calls. There were 6 other investors. The total amount involved was close to $1.4 million. Douglas was indicted in March. Securities fraud, wire fraud, 2 additional counts related to the way the operating account had been structured. He was arrested on a Tuesday morning. The news was on the local Pittsburgh station, a brief story, just 2 paragraphs. Nora was not indicted. Sandra had been clear with me early on that this was a possibility. The evidence suggested that Nora had been aware of what was happening, had participated in the conversation that solicited my money, and had actively worked to discredit my credibility when I raised concerns. But the degree of her direct involvement in the financial mechanics was harder to prove, and the DA's office made a decision. I won't tell you I wasn't angry about that. I was. I sat with Sandra in her office when she told me, and I stared at the window for a long time. I thought about what the comments would say, and yes, I'd read comments on videos like this one. I knew the reaction. People would say she got off easy. They'd be right. But Sandra reminded me of something. Civil court is a different matter. Nora had been present for the solicitation of funds. She had signed her name to correspondence. The civil suit named them both. The settlement came in May. I won't give the exact number, but I will tell you that I recovered the majority of what I had transferred. Not all of it, some of it was simply gone, spent on things that couldn't be recovered. But most of it. My attorney was very good. Douglas pled guilty to the lead fraud count in exchange for a reduced charge on the others. He received a sentence of 14 years. He was 41 years old. Nora, as part of the civil settlement, agreed to terms that included a structured repayment schedule and a legal acknowledgement that she was aware of the nature of the solicitation. She did not go to prison. She lost her job when the news came out. Her company terminated her quietly but quickly, and she lost the house, which was heavily mortgaged and which Douglas's legal fees consumed what equity remained. I don't know where she is living now. We have not spoken since the phone call in January. I want to tell you about June because June is when something happened that I didn't expect. I was at the clinic on a Thursday morning. There was a woman in the waiting room, older than me, probably late 70s, came in with her grandson, who was maybe 8 or 9. She was there for a blood pressure reading and a referral for a knee specialist. Routine. But the boy, while she was getting her BP checked, had found a tattered paperback in the waiting room magazine rack, one of those old Reader's Digest condensed books, the kind you don't see anymore, and he was reading it with the kind of total focus that only very young children and very old readers still manage. I watched him for a minute. His grandmother was telling me about her knee, and I was listening, but I was also watching this kid read. When we were done, I told her she had good BP numbers for her age, and that I'd put in a referral for orthopedics before she left. She thanked me and called to the boy to come along. He looked up from the book, genuinely reluctant to stop, and he said to her, "Grandma, can I finish this part? It's the good part." She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has been navigating the needs of children for 60 years. 5 minutes, I told him. I'll tell her you can have 5 minutes. He grinned and went back to reading. I don't know why that stayed with me. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing about it was dramatic. But I drove home that afternoon thinking about it, and about Patricia, who had always said that the good part was worth waiting for, about Norman, who drove 3 hours in the middle of the night because I needed him, about the 31 years I spent with my hands inside human hearts trying to keep them going a little longer. I had spent a year being a man whose daughter had betrayed him. That was real, and it mattered, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I was also, still, the man I had always been. The man Patricia had loved. The man who told a small boy in a waiting room that he could have 5 minutes to finish the good part. I thought, that's what's left when everything else is taken from you. What you've always been. No one can take that. It's October now. 14 months since that night in the rain in Nora's driveway. I take a walk every morning at 6:30. There's a park 2 blocks from my house, and at that hour, it's mostly just me and a few dog walkers and the particular quality of light that only exists in early October in Pennsylvania. Amber and slanted and somehow both warm and sad at the same time. Patricia loved October. I try to let myself love it too. I've set up a small scholarship fund at the hospital where I worked. It supports nursing students. Not medical students, nursing students, because I spent enough time in that building to know that nurses are frequently the ones who actually save you, and they get a fraction of the recognition. The fund is in Patricia's name. Filling out the paperwork for that was the best afternoon I've had in years. Norman and I have been talking about a trip. He has a daughter in Oregon who's been asking him to visit, and he thought I might come along, see the coast. I've never spent much time on the Pacific coast. Patricia always wanted to go, maybe this spring. My attorney tells me that Douglas is appealing his sentence, which his attorney is entitled to do, and which will almost certainly not succeed. I don't spend much time thinking about it. I did what I had to do, and the legal system did what it does, and that chapter is closed in the ways that matter to me. I think about Nora sometimes. I think about who she was at 10 years old and at 22, and whether those two people and the woman who stood in a doorway and told me not to come back are all really the same person. I don't know the answer to that. I suspect nobody does, really. Not even her. If she ever wanted to talk, truly talk, I think I would answer. Not because what she did was acceptable. It wasn't. Not because I'd forgotten. I haven't. But because I was a physician for 30 years, and I learned something that took a long time to believe, that closing a wound properly matters more than how angry you are about what caused it. A wound that's left open doesn't punish anyone. It just stays open. I'm 69 years old. I still have a bad hip. I still answer calls from Norman on the first ring. And I still show up at the clinic on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because there are people who need a referral and a blood pressure reading and someone to be steady in the room with them, and I can still be that. I intend to keep being that for as long as I can. That's enough. Some mornings, it's more than enough. I've been sitting with this for a while now, trying to find the right way to say it. Not the polished way. The true way. What happened to me, what Nora and Douglas did, wasn't a surprise that came out of nowhere. Looking back, I can trace it. Every time I excused a missed phone call. Every time I told myself Douglas's confidence was just ambition. Every time I handed over trust without asking hard questions. Because asking felt like a betrayal of love. I was wrong about that. Love doesn't require you to stop thinking clearly. In fact, I'd say love, real love, the kind worth having, demands that you think more clearly, not less, because the people closest to you are the ones with the most access to everything you built. I don't say that to be cold. I say it because I spent 31 years as a surgeon, and the first thing you learn in that work is that wishful thinking kills, not loudly, quietly. It kills by making you see what you want to see instead of what's actually there. I applied that discipline to everything in my career and set it aside completely when it came to my own family. That was the failure. Not generosity, not love, but the decision to stop looking clearly at the thing right in front of me. When I finally did look, I acted. I called Norman. I found Sandra. I gathered every document and I let the legal system do what it's built to do. People sometimes ask me if that was hard. Going after my own daughter in civil court. It was. But here's what I've come to understand. Accountability is not the opposite of love. Sometimes it's the most honest expression of it. Letting someone walk away from a serious wrong without consequence doesn't protect them. It just moves the damage forward. What carried me through those months wasn't anger, though I had that too. It was the clinic. It was Norman, calling on a Tuesday night to talk about nothing in particular. It was the small boy in the waiting room who didn't want to stop reading because he was in the good part. I kept showing up. That was the whole strategy. Keep showing up. Keep being useful. Keep doing the work that was mine to do, regardless of what was happening in a courtroom across town. I think what a person is made of gets tested most in the moments when they have every excuse to collapse. I had plenty of excuses. I was 69, I had a bad hip, I was sitting in a Holiday Inn in the rain having just been told not to come back. Nobody would have blamed me for shutting down, but shutting down was never something I'd allowed myself in an operating room, and I decided I wasn't going to allow it in this either. The money, mostly, came back. Douglas is in prison. Nora is somewhere rebuilding a life from what's left. And I'm here, taking my walk at 6:30. Watching October light move through the park, thinking about Patricia, thinking about Oregon in the spring. Some mornings, I still reach for the phone on Sunday out of old habit. Then remember there's no one to call. That part hasn't stopped hurting. I don't think it will. But I've learned, slowly, the way you learn things that matter, that carrying a hurt and living fully are not mutually exclusive. You can do both. I am doing both. That's the thing nobody tells you when something like this happens. The story doesn't end. You don't arrive at healed. You just keep going. And gradually, the going gets lighter. And one afternoon, you realize that you feel not fine, exactly, but intact. Still yourself. Still here. That's enough. Most days it's more than enough.